Ms. Francesca Albanese, please, the United Nations Rapporteur, please, I welcome you to the 5th Asma Jangi Conference, and thank you so much for joining us virtually.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I want to salute both the organizers and the other panelists. I would like to use the time at my disposal to set the scene and introduce the audience to the catastrophe that Israel has created in the Gaza Strip in the last 7 months. I don't think there is another term that describes this situation and actually gives a sense of the situation. But I also think that there are no words that capture the extent and the depth and the magnitude of this catastrophe, which is political, humanitarian, and it's also the total collapse, the total crash down of the international law in its preventative, in its regulatory and remedial function. So over the past 7 months, Israel has destroyed Gaza. It has used an arsenal of weapons that surpassed the damage that would have been caused by 2 nuclear bombs. In fact, this assessment dates, it's just of the 2 nuclear bombs is the assessment for the damage caused in the first 2 months of the assault. The entire infrastructure has been devastated. 70% of the homes have been either destroyed or severely damaged, so they cannot be used as such. All universities have been destroyed. 80% of the schools, 80% of municipal services, and churches, mosques, bakeries, the National Archive, the farmland, the floating, the boats, the fishing boats. Why so? Is it military necessity? Is it proportionate? Does it respect the principle of distinction? And if you look at the human cost, over 35,000 people have been killed. Nearly 15,000 of those are children. And 70% of the victims since the beginning have steadily been women and children. These people have not just been killed by bullets or by bombs. They've been buried alive under the rubble of their homes or the places that they used to call safe. They've been killed while they were seeking shelters, because now there are 2 million Palestinians who have been forcibly displaced. And those who have not died because as a consequence of fire, the explosion, the snipers, are dying because of hunger, are dying because of diseases. The other day I was in Egypt, and among all the devastated souls I met, there is one in particular which I will never forget. It was an 8-year-old boy. I have a son of the same age, and he was held by his shaking mother, a 30-year-old lady who had 4 kids, other 4 kids around her together with the child. And the child was shaking himself, and he was crying out of pain because I saw the pictures of him, Hamid, 8 months ago. He was a chubby boy, and he looked completely healthy. He developed pancreatitis out of eating animal food and drinking polluted water. And because with pancreatitis it's very easy to die, and it's extremely painful. He was giving morphine in Gaza because there was no other medication he could take to alleviate his pain, and now he's addicted. So they are winding him off from drugs, and he's in pain. It's atrocious what has been done. to the people and the children of Gaza. And this is why I concluded already 1 month ago that what Israel is doing is genocide. Is genocide not only because of the intent that has been declared over and over by military commanders and political leaders, not only because it has been filmed over and over by the very soldiers who have boasted about them burning or destroying homes, churches, violating and looting the private spaces of the Palestinians and their bodies. Think of the tortured and Palestinians who had been captured, arrested and detained in Gaza, and also in the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. But I say, and this has been, these are genocidal acts that have been filmed by the very people in Gaza. But what is the most important element of my analysis, in my view, is what I call humanitarian camouflage. Israel has never denied to have killed all these people. Israel has never denied to have destroyed all what it has destroyed. It has said, it says that it has done so in line with international law, in line with the principle of distinction, proportionality, and military necessity. Israel justifies its genocidal violence by distorting the categories of human shields. Everyone is a human shield. Collateral damage, if they were killed, is because they were in the area where military operations were ongoing without any evidence. And everything has been considered targetable, killable, and destroyable. Is this very genocidal logic that needs to be understood behind the humanitarian camouflage that Israel has used to justify its genocidal violence. If this genocide is not punished, not only this will be yet again the most serious denial of justice to the Palestinians across a history of injustice, across a history of impunity, but also the world will have condoned what can be seen as a proportionate genocide, because this is what Israel is seeking justification for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. I think I speak for everybody here and around, millions around the world, in saying that we thank you for your courage, your eloquence, and your clarity on this issue. One thing that there is the context of this round of violence, the barbarity of it, the carelessness of this round of violence, but it is all situated in a larger context as well. There is the context of the apartheid in Palestine, something that Human Rights Watch documented in a report in 2021. Since then, Amnesty International, there's a global consensus that Israel's treatment of the Palestinians constitutes apartheid under international law. That is a position that Human Rights Watch has taken. That's a position Amnesty International has taken. So we have two panelists who can speak to the tragedy of today, the tragedy that we see unfolding in front of us for the past 5 months, but also to place it in the larger context of continued oppression, of continued discrimination, of continued dehumanization. And then now, as we see possible genocide, crimes against humanity, use of starvation as a tool of war. So the first person that I'll go to is, we're very grateful to have Reverend Munther with us, the pastor of the Evangelical Church in Bethlehem, Palestine. And Reverend, I would go to you, and you can talk about, of course, what's happening, and also talk about this. I think given your position, given your take on this as a person of faith, because as a representative, as a leader of faith, because what we've seen is and a Palestinian, because what we often, in my opinion, there has been attempts to portray this as a religious conflict, which it is not. It is a human rights crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. But over to you, Reverend, for for your thoughts.
So, good afternoon, friends, and thank you for inviting me. I truly wish I was with you in person, but given the circumstances here at home, it's really hard to travel much with the many responsibilities we have. Thank you, Francesca, for your passionate analysis, a very accurate analysis of what's happening on the ground. We've been calling out from here in Bethlehem that this is a genocide. We've seen the intentions. We heard. The sad thing is that Israelis told us what they were about to do. They told us what they want to do, and they did it. No one should be surprised. Not only did they tell us what they were going to do, as Francesca said, both the people of Gaza, through their courage, filmed everything, broadcast their own execution and genocide live on earth for everyone to see. And the executors themselves, those committing the genocides, are boasting about it. It is literally hell on earth. And the ways in which Palestinians are being killed are unending, are horrific. Just few days ago, a good friend of mine from Gaza, his sister died because of the heat as she was trying to walk from Gaza to Rafah with her mother because of heat and dehydration. There is no water. Bodies are fragile. They're killing them slowly under the world's watch. It is indeed a vengeance campaign motivated. This is what they told us they want to do. And there is no safe place. And everybody is a target. Christians and Muslims in Gaza are suffering from the same acts of genocide. Tragically, many Christians as well died multiple ways. They were bombed. They were killed through snipers. They were killed because there is no medicine. You get sick in Gaza, chances are very high you can't survive it. They were killed because of the dehydration, as I said, multiple ways, just like everyone. And I think, you mentioned something very important. I speak here as a pastor, but this is not a religious conflict. I hope people realize this. This is not a religious conflict. This is one of the biggest misconceptions people have about the reality. Actually, it's not a conflict. That's the other misconception. It's not religious and it's not a conflict. We don't have two entities fighting. We have a colonized and a colonizer. And we as Palestinian Christians are not caught in between, as many in the West try to describe us, as if we're caught in between this battle between Muslims and Jews. We're part of the Palestinian people. Our land was colonized in 1948. We've lost land. We became refugees. We are displaced all over the world, just like all Palestinians. And yes, I speak from a faith perspective that this is a genocide. It must end. We must do whatever we can as people of faith, given our common humanity. We should stop this. But please don't get the impression that this is a religious conflict. And since the beginning, we've been crying out. This did not start in October 7th. This is not an endorsement of what happened on October 7th or a justification of it. But we are troubled by how the world have isolated. Israel managed to convince the world to isolate October 7th as a separate incident and ignore the context. And I would like to emphasize what was already said, the context that this is an apartheid. I was just sitting a few days ago with a senior South African diplomat, and he told me, Munther, the apartheid we had in South Africa is a walk in the backyard in comparison to what you have. What you have in Palestine is far worse than the apartheid we've had in South Africa. It's this continuation of that. Gaza has been under a brutal siege for the last 17 years. In fact, the United Nations General Secretary said before October 7th that if there is hell on earth for the children of the world, it is for the children of Gaza. This was said before October 7th. Yet all of this is ignored. And I want to also highlight something also important that is ignored in this whole tragedy. It's that we're dealing here again with colonialism, and particularly settler colonialism. This is how it all started in 1948. With the displacement of Palestinians and the creation of a new state on the land in which those Palestinians were displaced. So this is the context. This is what we're trying to say. You cannot isolate October 7th and treat it as such. And again, this is not to justify it. In fact, Palestinian Christian theologians like myself and others have been always advocating for creative nonviolent resistance. And I think if there is a time in which we should unite in our world to such a cause, it is now, because Israel must be held accountable. And the world cannot continue to relate to Israel as a normal state. Not only has Israel been committing the crime of apartheid, now they have committed a genocide. And if they go unpunished, there are no sanctions. If the world does not unite to hold those who commit war crimes accountable, then there is something wrong with our collective humanity. This war, in my opinion, has been a tragic illustration of a combination of three elements that enabled this genocide: coloniality, racism, and theology. Israel serves the empire. Israel serves the best interests of these world powers that control the economy and other things in our world. Israel itself came out of the womb of the British Empire. Today, it's a strong ally to the United States, to the United Kingdom. Economy and weapons sale, it's all part of this matrix that we need to deal with. Racism. This war has convinced us that the world does not look at us as equals. It's really clear to me that the world does not treat us Palestinians as equals. Francesca highlighted the many ways in which Palestinians were killed, but I think we were killed even before this war, when we were not considered fully human. This demonization and dehumanization that's already taking place. Think of the logic of Palestinians being taken, when they talk about blame Hamas for taking Palestinians as human shields. I always tell Western leaders, if a serial killer hijacks a school in your country, would you advocate the bombing of that school so that you kill the serial killer? Of course not, unless we are not talking about children in a school, but about animals. And maybe then animal rights groups will protest. Sadly, Palestinians have been dehumanized, even demonized throughout this war. And this is racism at its worst. And sadly, many have used religious rhetoric to justify this war. Using the Bible was weaponized by Zionists and by Christian Zionists. It's very sad how these three elements combine together: coloniality, racism, and theology. I want to conclude by repeating what I said in a sermon in December of last year during Christmas. And I believe this is so true today. Gaza has become the moral compass of our world. Gaza has become the moral compass of our world. I believe Gaza has divided the world. Divided the whole world, by the way, not just when I said it about the Christian world, but I think it divided all of us, Muslims and Jews. Today, there are many Jews who are opposed to this genocide. There are many Muslims who are opposed to it, and there are many Muslim leaders who are silent. The same with the church. There are many church leaders who were silent or who actually supported, but today there are many, many church leaders who are protesting, saying not in our name, and leading campaigns and marches around the streets, saying this genocide must stop. I think this war has divided our world, and Gaza is the moral compass. Where you stand and where you stood through this war, you will be remembered in history, especially given the length of this war and the fact that there is nothing that was hidden. Everything was there for the world to see. So where were you, as I repeat, when Gaza was going through the genocide? And speaking to an audience in Pakistan, I think this is the time in which we must unite together. To me, one of the important things that happened recently was the fact that it was South Africa that led the case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. And I hope this unites us from the global South together, from context of previous colonization and apartheid and racism, to say enough of this weaponization, enough of this violence, enough of this racism. And we have the moral credibility when we come together to defend our collective humanity. This is not, again, when I say this as people of faith, we must unite. I'm not saying this is a religious war, and we shouldn't make it a religious war, and we shouldn't unite as one or two faiths against the other. But I think if we believe in the true one God, our collective humanity compels us to work to end this genocide, compels us to fight all forms of coloniality and racism. And it's our call as people of faith to always seek to defend the oppressed and bring justice and mercy. Thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you, Reverend, for your very powerful and moving remarks. Of course, on the question of if it started on October 7th, and of course, I think everybody can agree that it did not. There was a context of apartheid, of discrimination, of persecution, of crimes against humanity before that. And one example, before I move to Shawan on this, is which is, again, as the Reverend said, any attacks on civilians need to be condemned, and there can't be any justification for that. But in August 2023, Human Rights Watch released a report which looked at killings of children in a period from November 2022 to March 2023. So this is all pre-October 7th, and in the West Bank, not in Gaza, where there is no Hamas. There is no Hamas in the West Bank. And so the idea of both in terms of time and in the saying that this is something which is sparked by one incident is not borne out by any facts. But the important things that the Reverend said about colonialism, the lens of colonialism, and of course, in the Israel-Palestine context, there is the violent settler colonialism that we see. But I want to speak to Shawan about. I want to ask Shawan, who is an iconic human rights activist from Palestine. In terms of the international consensus, the needle of the international consensus shifting, do you think something fundamental has happened? Looking at visuals from Columbia and Yale and Emory, looking at the London protests. So there is the solidarity of the global South, which I think the Reverend made an excellent point with the great symbolic power of South Africa becoming a petitioner in the ICJ case on apartheid, sending a message that oppressed people have this inherent recognition of oppression outside of tribalism, outside of ethnicity, outside of geography. So there is that. But there's also, do you think that unlike the past escalation, the past crises, the past assaults, be it 2014, be it 2021, be it 2009, do you think something fundamental has happened when you look at the visuals, not only from the global South, but you look at the London protests, when you look at what's happening in the US right now? Do you look at this with, amongst this sort of time of horrific, unspeakable tragedy, do you look at this and think that there is a glimmer of hope in terms of the consensus shifting? Or if that's overstating it, the needle of the consensus, something sparking in global consciousness, which is different?
Thank you so much. And it's a great pleasure to be with you today and to speak about the tragedies and atrocities and where Palestine is going. I think I try not to repeat what my colleague Francesca, you know that she is also under big smear campaign against her. They used all words against her to silence her, but she's more than a brave and courageous person. She is dealing with the principles of international law and justice. That's important. And Reverend also Munther, he makes my life now easy, even to speak. I don't want to say the same things. This is what I try to do, not to say the same thing, which I endorse every word that they said. But I can say Palestinians, they have no problem with the Jews. Palestinians, they have a problem with the racist, organization. It's called the Zionism, a Zionist movement. That's the case. Palestinians, they have a problem with the Zionism and their ideologies and their plans and their practices. That's another thing is what's going on in Gaza. It's a war on people. It's not a war against Hamas. It's a war in civilians. You can see that and watch that also in TVs. Directly, it's a live crime, what's going on. The third one, our case, it hasn't started on October 7th. Our case started last century. Now we have been in this situation, including also the crimes of genocide. They were taking place also in 48 and after, in 56 in Kufr Qasim, and before that in Deir Yassin, and many places. The ideology of this racist regime and settler colonial regime in Palestine is the killing. And they feel that they enjoy impunity. And why not? Why not they feel like that? If they don't hold them accountable, if they do everything, killings, home destructions, land confiscation, killing civilians everywhere, West Bank, Gaza, elsewhere. Half of Palestinians, they are refugees outside in different places over the world. They don't recognize the Palestinians as a people. They call them, as human animals. This is what even the defense minister, Israeli defense minister, said to the media. When also the president of Israel, he said that there is no, civilians in Gaza. It means that the kids, the babies, they are not civilians, they are combatants.
This is exactly what it means. Another thing is, I would like to mention one short story. It was said to me by a colleague. He's an academic. He was invited by EU groups, officials also, to strategize for the next 4 years. And they asked him to be a moderator. They gave him the documents on 6th of October, 1 day before what happened 7th of October. And he didn't find even anything about Palestine. Palestine is not a threat. Palestine is not a challenge. That's the case. He asked them, why? Where's Palestine? If you want to speak about the regional, let me say that, where's Palestine? They said, Palestine, it's a manageable case. It's a manageable case. This is how they look. This is the response of the European officials to him. This is what he said in a conference for the organized by laborers and also unionists in Norway. He told the story because at that time I gave an opening remarks in that event. And they said to him, it's a manageable thing, and more than that, that the Abraham Accords started, which it means that it's not a threat and it's not a challenge. We deal with it. 7th happened what? This is what's the strategy of the West, how they are dealing with the Palestinian case. It's a crisis management. This is how they look at it. This is how they dealt with it. And also on another side, they try not to make Israel, unhappy. The question is how to make Israel happy, even with all of these atrocities. How? By feeding Israel, by supporting Israel with all kinds of weapons, and also financially, and unconditionally, and blindly. That's the case. Here also, I would like to come to the selectivity and the double standards when it comes to the international law principles. I am not comparing between, victims and atrocities, but see what's happened, what's the reaction of America, other European countries against Russia. So, yeah, they say international law, we are completely against what's happened in Ukraine. We have not. Why not also in Palestine? Why don't act the same or react the same against Israel when it comes to their atrocities, to their aggression, to their killing, to their genocide? Even the German today, I saw it. This is part of the freedom of expression of the youth. Reaction. It's normal. I think it's normal. That's because also Germans, they said, never again. In 50s and after that, never again. And I think they meant by never again, it's never again anything happened against one group of the people, not against the humanity over the world. Yes, this is the case. And they still, supporting Israel with weapons, with all kinds and means of support. I think many countries, including Germany, US, they're complicit with the crimes going on in Gaza. They're complicit with the genocide going on in Gaza. This is how I look. This is how I look at also Britain. The British officials, they are complicit with the genocide taking place in Gaza. The Germans, the same. The American administration, the same. But in the same time, in the same way, I look at the public. If there is a hope, the hope is coming from the people in all of these places. I see the changes. I completely agree with you that we don't ask anyone to stand behind Palestine. We ask everyone to stand behind a human conscience. We ask everyone to stand behind justice, human rights, accountability, and all of these values. International law, it's not a Palestinian invention. International law, it's lessons that the Europeans and the West, they learned from the horrible and atrocities they were committed during the Second World War and the First World War. It's not a Palestinian invention. Why don't we respect it? Why? Is it just for a small group of people, or is it universal? This is part of the questions. This is part of the challenges that we are facing as a people. We are working in this field because we do believe the problem is not in the text. The problem is in the political will to act according to these principles and these values. There are some countries, they took and they stood strongly behind the principles of international law. One of them is Norway, since the beginning. They were in consensus. Yeah. Ireland, in consensus. Also Spain, Belgium, Luxembourg. There are many others. And here speaking also about the global north. I think, to be speaking in a very open way with you, there is, south and north. This is. And we made a mistake. I can confirm, as a human rights activist, as a human rights organization, we gave more attention to the north and not invested in the south, in the global south. This is really one of the main problems, and it's a gap also in our strategies, in our way of thinking. Other thing is, if you close the door before the legal means, the peaceful means, to defend your rights and to raise your message, if it's closed, all of these means closed, which means that you want to send to the young generations to learn from, which means you left for them to use. This is very, very really horrible and dangerous thing for the young generation. That's very important. The last point is, world is changing in all levels, with all means is changing. And I have to be honest with you, I am not concerned about my peoples, the future of my people. And if there is one has to be concerned for a long-term future, not the Palestinians. And no one can give a guarantee to the superpowers that they will stay as a superpowers. No one can give them a guarantee. That. And the future is for justice, and no doubt of that. The future is for human rights, no doubt of that. And the future is in the side of our people, no doubt of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shawan. This is incredibly moving. And yes, the limitations of the rule-based order have been very acutely highlighted. For example, Shawan gave of one example he gave is the conflict in Ukraine, which is a human rights crisis in its form. So one shouldn't play that game. But there was, and something that Human Rights Watch documented, and others as well, was the time that it took for the ICC, the International Criminal Court prosecutor, to respond to Ukraine, and the time it took for the International Criminal Court prosecutor to respond to Palestine, and the robustness of the response. So there is that, but as Shawan said, there is no other way apart from the norms that international human rights standards, which Israel has promoted, is flagrantly disregarded. In terms of, do we have somebody on so very good. That's important. Both of them, really. But in terms of looking forward, there is the idea of the global South solidarity, but there's also, in terms of global, it's, as I said, there's solidarities now with emerging across Europe, which you gave the examples. At the state level of Spain, of Norway, and at the people level, I think, all across the world, maybe, and I don't know if you agree with this, maybe first, it's obviously the level, the scale, the magnitude of the callousness of the violence. But also, this is happening now in full public view. This is happening with people seeing the whole world witnessing this genocide, possible genocide, or ethnic cleansing happening in real time, which wasn't the case even to Darfur. It wasn't the case even to Syria, to North Syria. But do you think that has changed in terms of public consciousness? Because Palestine was an abstraction to a lot of people. So in the US, but now the children came is not. That's an image, that's a video that the person has made. Do you think the globalized world would or has and stirred up this global consciousness, which fundamentally make it impossible or certainly more difficult for Israel to operate with the impunity that it has in the past? Or am I being too overwhelmed?
Look, if the world allows Israel to continue in this way and without holding them accountable, and to set the precedent in this way, I think everyone has to be concerned also over the world. Because when you set a precedent and you don't hold the criminals accountable, and they don't pay the price for their crimes. They will repeat it again, and also the others, they will learn the bad lesson also from it. That's the case. Because of that, when we say, don't stand behind Palestinians. Stand behind your values and the human values. And that's it. If you find that the Palestinians really, they represent the values, yeah, stand behind them. We have no problem. Stand behind the Ukrainians. Stand behind the other. Stand behind the human values. And the justice. That's the most important thing. And now regarding the change, yeah, because of that I said world is changing. In all levels. And also the technology makes everything, happen in front of you. You can see, you can engage. And the young generation, they have their own ways also to get their information. It means that the traditional way of censoring and controlling even everything, it doesn't work these days. It doesn't work these days. Before the Americans, they used to say, we are the ceiling of freedom of expression is high, because they used to control New York Times, Washington Post, and others. But now, for instance, they can't control what's called TikTok. Yeah. TikTok. They can't control what's other applications. They control the Western applications, which is clear. Now they censor you. They close the door before you to speak, but they can't control, for instance, other applications. And they found their own ways. This is also an issue. This is also a new change, a new dimension, and the new format. Because of that, I think things will change, and we see what's going on in the universities in US. I was shocked, to be honest with you. I thought that when I used to speak to Harvard students, when they used to come to Palestine, 200 in one mission, or 150 persons, or things, always I used to say, yeah, a promise is coming from the US for one reason, because the level and the ceiling of your freedom of expression is high, And I look what's happened just in the last 2 days, 3 days, last week, was going at Columbia University. I said, wow, the Americans, they fed up. They couldn't, continue in this way. Yeah, the students, they are now saying the right, taking also a position, standing behind these values. This is an issue which will change, and this is reminded me what's happened in the students' movement, mainly in Europe, in 1968. I compare this a little bit. It's happened the same. The hope, we keep the hope, and we will not give up, and we will not step back from, struggling and fighting for justice and for human rights, and that day will happen, for sure, no doubt of that, and people will change, and if there is a hope, the hope is coming from the people in the street and everywhere, not just in one place, globally speaking. Thank you.
Before we take some questions, and I think on the US bit, I'll just make one comment. The US state has always displayed capacity and willingness to suppress dissent, even in campuses. But what makes this ground unique, I think, is the last 2 times that it has happened is Vietnam and Iraq protesting. What is different? This time US is doing it on behalf of a foreign country. These are people who are not protesting. So Vietnam and Iraq was the US military. People. Yeah. So that, yes, you are listening. Now we take a few audience questions.
I went to Israel and Bethlehem that before 1967, in the late 1980s. And I had very many Palestinian friends. I was studying at the American University of Beirut, and I met George Howard. So, for me, it's something that is very personal. And I still remember that, treasure the memory of it's a beautiful place. Jerusalem, so historic. I just couldn't believe it. So thank you very much. It's an honor that you are visiting our country and that you are here to tell us you all know what's happening, and believe me, everybody in Pakistan, their hearts are beating with us.
Assalamualaikum. Sir, please tell the comments of Iranian President President to Pakistan on the issue of Palestine.
You want to take me to politics. I try to avoid speaking politics. But in general, I think every state has its own right to think about its interests, but not out of the main principles. The principles of, justice, human rights, international law, technique. It's very, very important. Now, Iran, they have its own way of thinking and supporting, and they play its role also there. Pakistan, it has its own way. I'm not speaking about it because I'm not familiar with the deep in politics, in their politics, but I keep hope on the Pakistani people and also on the Iranian people and all people everywhere over the world. That's what I put the hope on.
So the problem was about the content that was being, shown in the audiences of America. The American audiences were, seeing more reels or sort of videos. Reels or videos that were being shown to the American audience related to the genocide in Gaza. So the US Congress took a hearing over it and called the TikTok chief and sort of, gave it an angle of China. So we saw, a Chinese patient coming in. And then on the ongoing student protest, we also see the US Congress being involved and granted the Colombian UNI's president. Yeah. So can't we see the symbolic gestures of the empire that has colluded and has aided and abetted the Zionist regime? So this is of course providing the public message too. So how can we control it, or how can we give an alternative?
I'm not using any of them, not TikTok and not anyone of them, to be honest with you. I am not that sophisticated, to use all of these means. But what I said that when you want to get the truth and finding exactly the correct issue, you can find it. You can find it. And here, this is the challenge. Gaza, they put Gaza under siege for 17 years. 17 years. And it was like a big prison. 2 million, all 2, people, they were in prison. They damaged everything. Even the Israelis, they used to decide about how many calories each Palestinian in Gaza has to take. I'm not exaggerating. This is the Israeli High Court decision. This is the Israeli High Court decision. When the Israeli Human Rights Organization brought a case before them, speaking about food and everything, and speaking about spaghetti, because the spaghetti, the Israelis, they ban the spaghetti to get in Gaza. Just you can imagine to that extent. And here, the High Court, they ruled and say, don't worry, we account how many calories each person in Gaza will take. And it means that we will keep them alive. And in the same time, they found in Gaza these days that in Gaza they built a system, military or technology or IT or something like that. It means that they found their own ways. You can't control the life of the people and suppress the people forever like this. And you don't want, for instance, to find another way or a response or a reaction. And it's the same like technology. You can't now, with the young generation, close the space before them and close the door before them. No way, no way. They will find their own way to get out of that. And now I think the Americans, they became like North Korea. They are speaking about North Korea, and Korea it's a dictator, Korea it's a closed dictator. What's the US administration doing now, for instance, in the different universities? They want to silence the people. Even, there are also sounds came out and voices came out speaking about the TikTok. They have to close the TikTok, or the TikTok has to be by Americans, by American business. This is what they state. This is what doesn't work. I think justice, equality, human rights, respect the dignity of the people. This is the only way, can build and can save societies and also can save the rights of the people. That's the only way. That's the only way.
You said that I'm not worried about Palestinian people's future because human rights and justice will prevail. But if the sake of argument, if we say that it will not happen in future, then what will be the policy of Palestinian people?
Thank you.
Sorry, I have a question too for Shawan. I wanted to ask, given that there's been complete immunity to the Israeli government about the ongoing genocide and complete destruction of Gaza, do you see that the violence in West Bank is going to increase in the coming months? Is that their next target?
Before things started in Gaza, it has been going on since so long. I can give a number. Before October 7th, we documented more than 400 Palestinians, they were killed in West Bank. Many of them, they are children. That's the case in West Bank. Killing is a daily practice. House demolitions is a daily practice. And from October 7th until today, more than 520 Palestinians, they were killed also in West Bank. Invasion and raiding of Palestinian cities, towns, villages, it's a daily practice every day. Between 16 to 22 places, and places not towns. I'm speaking about place, a community is a city, is a community. That's what I mean by places. They arrest, they kill, they humiliate the people, they destruct the properties. This is what they are doing. More than that, they fragmented the West Bank. They put even metal gates, and all the entrances of the cities, towns, villages, and they closed them in 5 minutes. That's each community in West Bank became as a prison. That's what they are doing. I am from a village in Al-Khalil, in the southern side of West Bank. That village or town, it's 45,000 people. We have different entrances, around. They closed all the entrances. Last a few days, you heard about a female student. She is 20 years old. She was killed in the entrance. It's in the entrance of my village. And another two, they are brothers. They were killed there. They are also the same one. And they said that they want to stab, the Israeli soldiers. How they can stab them? And there is a gate there. They try to go to Hebron, the city. They walk because we can't use our cars. If I want to go to visit my mom, I have to go extra 32 kilometers to reach my mom. Extra. The normal one, it takes me 1 hour from Ramallah to that village, but also extra 30 kilometers like this, dry roads, go through the mountains to reach, because they closed everything. That's since October 7th. This is also in other places. That's the case. The people, they are living there under oppressive regime. It's oppressive, oppression them. That's the case. This is the case in West Bank. You can't say that West Bank now, they are living there normally. No. They entered the main raid the refugee camps in Jenin, Tulkarem, every day. That's the case. Killing people, 10 in one time, 5 in one time. This is the case. After they killed them, they go and they demolish the house of the family. Sometimes I ask myself, if they demolish the house, why? For what? For which reasons? What they will gain from that? They want to do one thing, to say to the Palestinians, hey guys, if you want to save your life, your children's life, your property, things like that, you have to leave this country. Go. This is also another way for the transfer of Palestinians outside of their homeland. That's for political reasons. And this is the main difference between South Africa that we mentioned and also the colonial regime in Palestine. In South Africa, they used to discriminate against the South African people, but they were not targeted their existence there. In Palestine, they targeted our existence there. They would be more happy if they sent outside of our country, and they don't recognize us as a people. That's the case. Even in their, let me say, peace agreement with the PLO at that time, they didn't recognize us. They refused to add what's called Palestinian National Authority. They said Palestinian Authority. This is my passport, according to Oslo Agreement. That's the case. Nothing called national, because they don't recognize us as the people has a right to exercise self-determination. That's what the main problem. Without that, recognizing the Palestinian right to self-determination, right of return to the refugees, no way to have peace there. I hope that the world, its human conscience will wake up and learn the lesson. We have been not surrendered since 100 years, and we will not surrender, and we will not disappear, and we will not step back, and we will not give up for sure. We will continue fighting for all of us.
Thank you very much for being here. We're very happy you could make it in this very difficult time. My question is, what can people of Pakistan do, or the government of Pakistan do, to support the Palestinian cause and Palestinian people?
I think to raise your voice up strongly to the street, to diplomats, to everyone. This is also very important for me. Palestinians, they are watching. They are watching what's going on there. I have no doubt that the Pakistani people, they stand well behind also the Palestinian rights. No doubt. The question is, maybe with some activity, and you know better than me, you know what to do here. I can't give you anything or recommend any specific things. You know better than me.
My question is regarding the mass graves which are found near Al-Nasr Hospital in Gaza. So, as you can see, the double standards of the West and the US. The only media channel I'm seeing that's showing the mass graves, and the Israeli army has committed wars against humanity. They bury people alive there. The only news outlet I'm seeing the news on is Al Jazeera. BBC is not showing anything, nor CNN or any of the US outlets or Western media. What do you say about the double standards of the West?
What will be the two-state solution? And the Israeli Supreme Court's decision will they be in consonance with international law?
Will they be helpful for the two-state solution or not?
Look, I said, I spoke about the standards when it comes to the implementation and respect of international law. Mass grave, it's clear. We document some of these things, and this is shown part of the story. When tomorrow the ceasefire happens and things stop, you discover the scale of the crime in Gaza. Not everything we know and we discover and we document. Not everything. The case is bigger than that. Just you can imagine, they tied the hands of the people, they arrested them and they killed them. They executed them. They executed them with hundreds, with thousands of people like this. Now there is around 8,000 Palestinians disappeared. We don't know where are they. We don't know. We don't know if they are in prisons. If they are prisons, how they treated them. They don't allow the ICRC to visit, to go to visit, and they don't give the ICRC any word, any information about the Palestinians. They 1,000, I don't know, some of them, they are workers. They used to work in Israel in that day, on October 7th, and they didn't allow them to go back. And they stuck there and disappeared. Many of them, they were disappeared. The Palestinians, they entered to Israel at that time, 7th, because they were in, let me say, in big prison, and they left the prison. They felt that, that now they are free or something like that. Some of them, or many thousands, they didn't go back to Gaza anymore. Their families, they don't know anything about them, if they are alive or not. The Israelis, they refuse to give anything. The case is bigger than and more than the 120,000 Palestinians they were killed and injured. It's beyond than that. And here, just one point. If the international community, the Americans, though they feed Israel with everything, they couldn't give a bottle of water to a child who is dying in the northern side of West Bank. What's this system? Wow. Israel is really is stronger than the world, than the US, than everyone now. Because the others, I think, they supported Israel. They continue to support Israel unconditionally, and they playing the game with the international law. They don't use anything from the international law in Palestine. They use it in any other places. Also in your country here, they can come and give you, let me say, a lecture about the human rights and the rights of women and all of these things. But when it comes to the fundamental things in Palestine, they ignore that and they don't speak anymore about these things. That's the case now. This is big issue in Palestine. The other one about two-state solution or one-state solution. I say we are standing behind the Palestinians' rights to self-determination, right of return, that's dissolve the apartheid regime, dissolve also the colonial regime. After that, we are speaking about two states, one-state solution, something like that. It's not a big matter. It's not a big matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Shawan. And I must thank Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. She's not joined right now, and the Reverend Munther. I think this was a session is very close to my heart, and I'm sure as it is to many of you here and many around the world. Very powerful. We got of course, a very clear, passionate and moving account of the tragedy that's unfolding. But I also think that we also got a message of hope and optimism from Shawan amidst this bleak time. And that the solution lies in human rights, in international law, as difficult, as paradoxical as it seems at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.